All right. Hello and welcome back, everybody. This is another panel session from the Climate Farmers Community Series. Today, we're going to be focusing on the relationship and sometimes the disconnect of academia and research on real farms and how that can be strengthened and where the potential lies in doing research and learning on farms that benefits both the research institutions and farmers themselves. We got some great panelists from our network here today. And just before we get started, this is an ongoing effort for the Climate Farmers community to facilitate peer-to-peer learning within our community to help farmers with successful transitions to regenerative agriculture. And we're constantly exchanging ideas between members of our network and the farmers in our community, trying to enrich these conversations that are most important to the issues that our farmer network has. There's a whole list of recordings on our YouTube channel and, of course, in the Regenerative Skills Podcast if you want to go back through our archives. And also, we have these every month, so keep tuned for the next ones as well. You can join our community for free at any time if you're an active farmer anywhere in Europe by going to our website at climatefarmers.org. Now, to kick us off, and since these guys will give their own introductions much better than I can, let's start with Jan. Will you tell us a bit about your operation and the relationship that you have with research institutions and what learning plays as a role in the advancement of your own farm?
Hi everyone, thank you Oliver for the introduction and also for the invitation. So I'm Jan Bresto. I'm co-managing a farm in northern Germany, although I'm French, for 4 years now. I have myself an academic background, so I got a PhD in agroecology, so in France, and also a bit of background of working directly with farmers on experiments through farm association, like in my case was Greenotech in Belgium, depending on where you are. In Germany it would be GKB, so all those farmer association in the field of conservation agriculture. So this type of association I worked with and then directly with farmers and trials on farms. And this is this approach and also approach of small groups of farmers working together and experimenting together is what I brought here. So on my farm and on my operation. So we started 4 years ago to take over the family farm of my partner. And 1 year later, I created a farm group working together on regenerative agriculture in our context. And we are basically sharing experience. And since this year, actually really really experimenting together with a strict protocol. Before it was more exchange, so informal exchange, which are very important and bringing the farmers forward. But what is bringing us a step forward, so to say, is really to formalize it in order to do the same type of experiment and in order to be able to capitalize also and to objectivize. And this is something so I do within this network I created and with the farm as well, so with our farm as well, being one of the farm in the network. Also something I did since the beginning of our farming here. To give you just one example, working with an engineer office in the field of agriculture in Germany, it's called Engineer Bureau, to objectivize the performance of rapeseed mixed with fava beans, where the fava beans is freezing. So companion cropping rapeseed fava beans, where the fava beans is freezing in winter, to see if we can really do the same than we have in Belgium and in France, meaning reduce nitrogen fertilization afterward. So in spring, following the rapeseed sowing. So this is the kind of type of things we are doing. So collaborating with institutes and also doing our own things, where we just do our experiments on splitting the field in 2 parts and looking at how it's going, and also doing this type of doing research within our network.
Very cool. And you're very modest because you're also one of the instructors on our region agronomy program and have been a crucial advisor to a lot of our farmers in the network as well. Now, let's go over to Yuso. Can you give us an intro to your own operation and how you've been collaborating with institutions to learn more and share those learnings with your network?
course. Thanks for having. I'm Juuso Joona from Finland. We are having an arable organic regenerative family farm in southeastern Finland, 3 hours north from Helsinki. We are farming 150 clay hectares, organic seed production, but also food crops like, the seed production is mainly currently oats and peas, and food crops are at the moment rye and beans, some hemp as well. Commercially and for our own consume, we are growing a lot of vegetables and berries as well. I've been responsible for our farm since early 2000 when I got to university and to the sources of information. And I then realized that a limiting factor on our farm, economically, but both quality of life of our family, was actually the soil health and the low amount of organic matter in soil and the compaction of the soils. And I started to look for the solutions to improve the soil and started to introduce several practices to improve soil structure, to increase organic matter, the biological activity. And first and foremost, I started to diversify our crop rotation, and then later started to use organic amendments. And then maybe the first trial started, I started to use side stream from the pulp and paper industry, because our farm is located in one of the world's most concentrated area of pulp and paper industry here in southeastern Finland. So there's a lot of these organic side materials coming out from these mills, and we developed the so-called soil improvement fiber, which is made from the pulp mill sludges, which are fine wood fibers coming out with the effluent water, and they prove to be very good in increasing organic matter, improving the water holding capacity, the soil life itself. And then we started trials with the Natural Resources Institute of Finland with these materials, and they results were that they actually decreased the nutrient leachment risk by 50%, and that's been a very nice scientific success as well. But since then, I've been running several trials on our farm in many horizon projects, cooperation with different research institutes. Currently, we are having resilience and soil rest projects in collaboration with the Natural Resources Institute of Finland. And currently, we are trialing and comparing conventional plowing with a novel method of minimum tillage in terminating perennial lay. And this perennial lay is like a backbone of our crop rotation here. And in organic system, conventionally, the plowing has been the tool to terminate the lay, but we've developed the minimum tillage method because the plowing is not very good for the soil, as you all know, especially in these clay soils. And my hypothesis is that this minimum tillage method results in better yields and actually uses less time and energy, and that's what we are going to find out in next 3 years. I'm happy to discuss more on this theme today.
Yeah, we will dive deep into that in a short period, but let's go now to Loki. Loki, can you tell us a bit about the relationship that you have with the farmers that you work with for your own research, and how the learning from Wageningen is integral to those relationships?
Yeah, good question. So my name is Loki Schevel, and I work at the Wageningen University at the Farming Systems Ecology Group. And my research is more or less completely dedicated to regenerative agriculture. So that does not mean that I only work with regenerative farmers. It's also a lot with conventional farmers that are very much interested in starting the transition. And with them, I try to help with the monitoring of these farms, but also the modeling of transition pathways, and really help them to design these regenerative future-proof systems. That's a lot of fun. And besides that, we also do a lot of teaching. And so we really try to engage with the students and train them to support them on how to monitor regenerative agriculture. If they work with farmers in the future as advisors, how can they help building these trend pathways with them? And the farmers I work with, I'm not sure if everybody is doing that in Wageningen. We can discuss that today, because I think is a disconnect between sometimes researchers or academia functions and the farm realities, is that I try to build relationship with the farmers. So sometimes even create friendships between me and the farmer, that we know what we are doing, but also we just basically sometimes hang out with each other. To have the relationship so that I always can go with questions to them. And at the moment, I am in this position that I have the opportunity to also do my PhD on regenerative agriculture, to have a group of farmers around me. I can ask to them, what do you want to know and what can I research? But that is not something that can always happen. But I have the fortune that I can do that I can ask these questions to farmers, and then I can see if my expertise can, help answer these questions. And today I hope I can learn a lot from also Jan and Yuso, because they're quite unique. I'm the one who's only researching, but they are both scientists and farmers. So I'm very curious what they have to say.
Thank you, Loki. And before we throw back to them, maybe we can make a transition, because the background on the call today was a really good illustration of a point that you tried to make, since this was the cover image of your, I think it was your thesis, you said. And for those who will later be listening to this on the Regenerative Skills podcast, I'm going to quickly describe it. So there is a big, broad river running right through the middle behind him. And there is a broken bridge on either side that doesn't connect. And then there is a ladder or a rope bridge further back between what looks like an industrial operation and a regenerative operation. Can you explain what that image is meant to invoke?
Yeah, okay. This was the cover of my PhD thesis, which was really dedicated to help with this transition. And one of the struggles I faced is that everything that I tried to publish, because that is what is expected from a researcher, ended up in a scientific article. But the farmers I worked with, they did not understand my articles. So then I was discussing with my supervisor, like, how can we bridge that? And as a message, the cover of my PhD thesis was a simplified drawing that should illustrate what I actually aim to do. That only from the cover, everybody knows, even a little kid understands what I was doing. And the idea is indeed, I think, a lot is already happening in this transition towards regenerative agriculture. So there are definitely bridges there, but it is still a niche. Regenerative agriculture is not a mainstream thing, but I think we are building the bridge to get there. And I hope, and this sounds very cheesy, that if I put my shoulders like this, I can contribute to filling that gap and help building that bridge.
Fantastic, and beautifully illustrated there too. It's very impactful. Now, with that in mind, that the relationships here are really what is central. The learning is happening on farms, and the legitimization and the scientific process is often, perhaps at a higher standard or a higher capability from the institutions. But when there is a lack of communication between either side, this is often when real working farms struggle to get information from one end, and the institutions struggle to get real life examples that create practical, usable information. This is something we've explored on previous podcasts. So going back to Jan, having worked in academia and now also being very much involved in the fields, where do you see kind of the core or the base of this disconnect, as well as opportunities to repair it or bridge it?
I think the core of this disconnect is coming from that researchers are most valued to publish articles which are cited. They are not most valued to have impact on the field. And that brings, for instance, I will give you a very practical example. I had a discussion with a researcher because I wanted to involve this working group that I described, so this group of farmers, this network of farmers I created, into a Horizon research project. And I discussed with the German professor who would be in charge of Germany, right, in that Horizon project. He told me, yeah, it's super interesting what you are doing with your group. I would like to research on cover crop, special cover crops. It would be like those. I don't know how you say you said in English that a bit like cactus plants, which would be cover crops that will store a lot of zinc, and then could release this zinc into the following crop. But if you know a bit this type of, so I'm speaking about cactus, but it's those plants which are storing a lot of water, And if you know a bit about their growth dynamic, then you know that they won't produce a lot of biomass, and that it will be an issue, and it's a nice topic, but will very likely not help the farmers in the context of Germany in the following 10 years. And why was he focusing on that is because it's his research topic and he is publishing on that. The second part of this gap is then that those research programs, they require that you describe precisely what you want to achieve, what you want to test, what you want to research when you submit this program. And it's the case for Horizon program, but it's also the case for smaller, actually close to farmers program that I also applied for my groups, and which there didn't work because the description was not precise enough of what we wanted to do. And what we described is that we want to work on regenerative potatoes, and we gave the ideas of practices we could test and combine. But we said we will decide with the farmers when we get the funding, right? Because this is what we want to do. We want to decide exactly on the research with the farmers and not before and then involve farmers who might say, yeah, I'm not interested actually into that. Where I see the solutions, because you spoke about solutions, and please tell me if I am too long in my answers, is to involve the farmers right at the beginning of those research programs, and to enable, for instance, for the last example I gave, in Bayern, they found a very nice solution, which is to give 2 steps for the application. The first step, you can, and you get funding already at the second step. So in the first step, you can say a bit globally what you would like to do. And in the second step, you already have fundings to work with the farmers and to write the last proposal that will go through a selection, and then you get it or you don't get it. This is one solution. Another one would be to focusing already on the precise description what we are going to test, is to evaluate the project based on the methodology. So if you are precisely describing how you are going to work with the farmers and what you want to do and achieve with them, that it's as much it has as much value as if you describe precisely what experiment you are going to do. So I would say it's basically, yeah, it's the main point I wanted to make.
That's really good. Yeah. And so involving them in early stages so that they can help to shape the research that's being done, and probably also the conditions under which it's being done. Because we've seen in other examples how what seems like a partnership ends up being exploitative in lack of compensation for the time and effort required to do these trials, or not freely sharing the information afterwards, and other examples like this that I've heard. So this is a really good insight. Now I want to go back to you, Saul. You have some good success stories of partnering with research institutes. And so clearly you've been able to bridge this gap. Can you tell us about how that started? Where did the conversations begin? Were you approached by them? Did you propose a project yourself? And what was key to keeping this relationship supportive to you as you started these trials?
Well, in Finland, it's easy. This is a small country. We know each other, and I'm doing research as well, so I know most of the agricultural researchers. Participating in several projects earlier as an advisor or educator, or then as an assistant. So once I was a partner in Horizon project, and that was my first and last time, because it's very heavy for a farmer to make that management alone. So since then, I've been only working as a subcontractor for research institutes. That makes much more sense. So we've done this already for years, and there's of course limited amount of projects I can take at a time on our farm. It takes a lot of labor. I can do it all by myself. I have some summer trainees and my children who are working on those plots as well this week also. And also then the research scientists are coming to the plots and taking samples and having lab force as well. So it's a lot of collaboration, communication in this case. And you really nicely just mentioned the limit there is. I just want to stress all the in one national application problem where they weren't allowed to compensate for farmers on their time spent and effort, and that's a big lack on many funding elements, even in agricultural research. So in Horizon, that's not a problem so far, but in some instruments, they don't allow compensation, and that's I think that's always should be a must to pay farmers of their participation, even though it's something very little, just giving their land or answering a quotation or survey or something, but all because it takes their time. They are like entrepreneurs, and they need to somehow replace the lost income. So that's one that it needs to be taken care.
Jan, did you want to jump in there?
Yes, I just wanted to give a one point. Remind me just what you said. In the EIA projects I was applying for, there was a very nice part, and was compensate time for farmers, but also compensate for the risk. And it's sometimes, especially I'm working with potatoes, so very high value crop. And sometimes it can be a huge loss if the experiment is not working, right? So if you lose 10 tons of potatoes out of 60 tons, so maybe not that much, but 10 tons of potatoes when the price were still good was about 2,000 euros per hectare. So that really was very good. And that's also to include the risk, so as an experiment of the farm.
That is a very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. So I want to go now to Loki, with your experience. So with all these people that you've worked with, what insights can you give us from the feedback that you've heard from farmers about their relationships with learning institutions, and what could create more opportunities for collaboration based on what you've seen?
Yeah, I think there's many things. So the funny thing is, when you invited me for this panel, we were actually in the process of writing a paper about the collaborations between farmers and researchers in research projects. Because I sat down the past couple of years and did many interviews with regenerative farmers in Europe, and these were very nice conversations, but also I asked for reflections on what we should research, but also what are you most frustrated with researchers? And maybe I can share a little bit of that, and then I can discuss opportunities for better collaboration. Because what I think is very nice for me is that besides doing research, I work a lot with young researchers that are very early career or still are doing their master thesis, and they need to learn a lot. And what I hear from farmers, especially regenerative farmers, is that they are these days very much overwhelmed by research requests. There's so many students. Like we always hear, farmers, the number of farmers are declining. Very much true. But the number of researchers almost exploding. It's increasing so high. And at the same time, what also Jan was saying, we get actually paid, or at least valued, for the number of publications and the number of science stations. We're currently trying to change that, and I can discuss that later, how we're trying to do that in Wageningen. But with these experiences of the students working with the farmers, we heard that there's so many researchers, students, peers, but also advisories asking the same questions to farmers. So everybody is asking the farmers, what is regenerative agriculture for you? Because we want to create an overview and provide a new definition. what are the barriers to move towards regenerative agriculture? What are the motivations to move towards regenerative agriculture? I mean, very interesting questions, and I love these discussions. But the problem at this point is that there's a huge number of publications out there answering the same question. And now we're at this very moment in a situation that I've heard that in Wageningen, for example, there's different students from the same institution asking the same question to the same farmers. And they get frustrated. And even within projects, there are students that do not know from each other asking the same questions to the same farmers. And they get fed up with that. And therefore, research fatigue looms very large. And these are things we can avoid. We can discuss that later. So I think that is a big problem at the moment, research fatigue among farmers, and especially because they feel these questions are already answered or at least not relevant for them. So asking the right questions to them that bring value to them is at the moment very important to keep them engaged. Otherwise, as you say, sorry, or they don't even respond anymore on the requests. And I think that is very much a pity. Where there's opportunities, I think Jan and Yusa already mentioned some to collaborate better with farmers. And there's abundance of literature about this, is participatory research. So if you write a project proposal for a Horizon project, I'm not so much a fan anymore of Horizon projects. I can also discuss that a little bit, is that at the moment, if you already have good relationship with farmers, you have a good idea, and you want to do it with farmers, make sure that they're at the table to discuss ideas with them, what research objectives you have, how you will communicate with farmers, what the expectations are. And compensation could be a part of that, but I think especially the research value is sometimes much more key for them to actually get new knowledge or understand what the transition could bring. And that happens still, although there's abundance of literature how to do that, especially learning agroecology, is not happening too much at the moment. I think still the research to a large extent creates extractive dynamics from farmers asking for data. And I think that we can change. Should I stop there?
Well, yeah, if you've got more, please keep going.
Okay, yeah.
You seem like some main ones, but yeah, I know there's more.
Maybe Jan and you have also questions about it, because I'm curious how they think about it or how they deal with that. About the Horizon projects, but what sometimes bothers me is this large pool of research that currently exists. Like, we submitted also applications to Horizon proposals, but then at the moment you submit, I'm not sure how many people in the audience have this experience, you can immediately see how many other submissions are there. So we did a submission, and later we heard there's 200 other submissions for an Horizon project to get the grant. So we had a 2% chance to get the funding. And that is super demotivating, because with this Horizon proposal, you don't get the money or a little bit of money beforehand to write the proposal. It is really in your own time. And if you ask the time of farmers to really sit down in this participatory, beautiful research approach, basically you can also not compensate that time for them. And that is a problem. I think it's very nice that John illustrated there's companies that try to do this differently in 2 steps, but in general, I don't see this happening. What we now try to do, where I try to invest in, is also philanthropic funding, which is way more flexible. There you just go with the farmer to a philanthropy fund, and way more quickly you get to hear if you get the funding or not. And the nice thing is, you're not so much stuck to these deliverables Jan was talking about. That if you made promises and you did not know in the beginning if you can, make these promises for real. It's a project plan, but you need to stick to that with Horizon projects. There needs to be very concrete deliverables in there, and that is sometimes very difficult to work with. Yeah,
there are many challenges like this, but it's really interesting to hear from the supply side of research that's often not talked about, that there is a real demand for this and there's clearly opportunity in it. It's just about making that communication flow and recognizing the needs from the other side. I want to go back to Yuso. So in the communication that you've managed, you said you've had relationships with these institutions in the past, which helped to open doors and get these programs started. Is there anything that, how do I say this? You would wish would be better understood about your situation from those institutions themselves that maybe they're not aware of that could make your job easier or make it easier for you to work with programs and research?
Well, at the moment, as we've been doing this so far, and I'm a researcher myself as well, it's kind of easy to collaborate with the research scientists and the field workers there. But if I may think more from the view of more typical farmer, it would take a translator in between in many times, because especially in Finland, I see the agricultural research has already went a bit too far from the farmer. They are mostly working on a experiment sites on their own, not that much on farms. And I'm sure we've already mentioned the keyword farmer-led research, what we already at least Luki described, so that farmers participates planning and then conducting the trials and then disseminating an iteration of the results. And there should be a feedback loop of research, farmer and advisory back and forth. Then it flows, and then the research questions are relevant, and then the outcomes will be directly taken into practice if they are valuable. Too many times I see agricultural research which is kind of studying bad prevalent practices and not best available practices or ones that could be already in use in the forerunners, and that's very crucial in regenerative agriculture, especially where many farmers are trialing and observing and continuously developing their practices. So I think that the research should follow more what farmers do and then collaborate with them. And I see that this kind of farm-led research and on-farm trials are very, very useful for both farmers and the research. And even, or especially when there's a group of farmers working together, making maybe a same kind of research setup, but especially learning from each other and then iterating the results that comes out. And the needs you were asking from the other side, I think the research scientists, they should go more out, I would say. Luke is doing, for example, a great job in this space, but I think every agricultural research scientist should go more out to farms and meet farmers, discuss with them, and really listen to their needs.
And by listening to those needs, what are some of the things that you wish more people understood about a working farm's situation? Not just, the variables and the lack of controlled areas that are ideal for doing research in, but also the demands on your time, perhaps the inconsistency of schedule. What other things would you wish that they would understand before looking to collaborate with you?
Well, there are these everyday challenges. Maybe one is that don't ask any surveys during the growth season. So it's more flexible during the winter time, of course. And farmers who participates on trials and experiments, they need to be motivated well and kept on a track during especially if it's if one are lucky, it's a several year project, not just one season. And if it's 3-5 years, they need to be kept on a track all the time. They need to be informed. I think farmers don't care that much about peer-reviewed results 3 years after the study has been done. They want to hear even preliminary results after the season, so that they can use that information in their decision making for the next season, and they even can improve. And we've had some funny situations actually we've had in a Baltic Sea Action Group, we had a group of 100 farmers trialing carbon farming practices from 2018 to 2025, 23. It was a 5-year project, and we educated them from farmer to farmer. We established the small groups among farmers. They really did peer-to-peer learning, and first they were kind of amazed. And in the end of the project, we need to really hold them not to disturb the trials, because they were supposed to do one practice on this experiment and then a control site. But when we said them, hey, you're
Oh, such an unfortunate time to lose the connection. That's a real
happy,
cliffhanger.
so that they can really go forward, and the result was actually that they're outside the trial plots, their soils got better and farms went much more forward. So this was a nice result, and the example how farmers actually act.
Thank you for that. Yeah, those are, I mean, it really is about establishing those relationships, right? Because you don't always think to ask the questions that are going to give you what you need to know. But by spending time, like you said, out on the field and getting to know people, these things often come out in conversation rather than a survey, right?
Oliver, may I ask a question to you? So, because what he was telling was quite dear to me, and I feel also a bit guilty, because I think part of the solution could be education, because at Wageningen we teach about different tools to use, how to do monitoring, how to do modeling, but I've not seen lectures around how do you do research with farmers. Because I also tell always all my master students, don't send emails to farmers or don't expect a response in the growing season. They are busy. But there are so many ways to make it fun for a farmer to join research, even if it does not have a direct benefit for them. And you cannot always expect that. But I see so many ways how you can make it fun for farmers. But I was you saw, or maybe Jan from their experience, like, do you have nice experience with students or researchers that came up with a creative way to make things beneficial for you, or at least fun for you?
That's an awesome question.
Well,
Do you guys want to jump in on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Best example here is maybe the researchers who comes to our farm spends several days here, and they're just coming along with me on the field on a tractor, and we're having a discussion there. I wouldn't have time to sit on a table face to face and discuss, have an interview, but if he or she would like to come with me on a field and to a tractor, make observations, that's useful for both, I guess.
Fantastic. Jan, do you have some insights there?
I think I don't have a super insight, but I definitely see user what you are saying didn't happen to me, but coming in the tractor and doing things with. For me, the challenge is that I'm also being an advisor, so I'm kind of a very mixed job, which is hindering someone following me in the all day work, because it's very different. But I did have experience getting students, because I was also teaching at Leuphana University, close to my place, who came, and it's just fascinating. But I like to disseminate knowledge, to show things, help other people discover, learn things, and especially bringing people who are coming more from environmental background, ecology background, into the reality of the farm. This is kind of maybe a personal mission, and also something very fun.
Nice. Well, one thing I'm pretty sure we've established here at this point is that there is quite a bit of demand from both sides, especially from the research side, wanting to get more information from the farms, and the farms themselves really keen to learn and get some assistance in systematically studying what it is that they're trying out, or what they could perhaps integrate into their rotations. Yuso, you had an insight that you wanted to add to that before I get to the next question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think students and trainees coming to our farm are very helpful in that they are asking, why are you doing this here? Because then I need to explain it to really and then find out myself actually why am I doing that, and that's always good to ask why am I doing this or that.
Yeah, that's always a good question for sure. It makes you reflect on your own reasoning as well. Loki, you said that you had some ideas about what could make this more fun for both sides. And we jumped to our farmers here, but what are some things that you found from your experience?
Yeah, so every time I talk to a regenerative farmer in my interviews, I try to ask that, like, how can we stimulate that? Because also we see this overwhelming or this abundance of new researchers coming up or thesis students. And there's many more people who are doing now a master thesis in Europe, and they all need a place to do their research. And the farmers feel overwhelmed. That's never okay. So actually what Yuso is saying, we try to do that, but also many farmers see that as a burden. So yeah, then I have this guy or this girl walking with me, and I need to spend more time than is needed because I don't really understand what they have to do there. So some farmers really enjoy that, some they don't do that. But what I often ask the students is just ask the farmer. There's many ways. I heard jump on the tractor. That is what I also do myself. Like even if it's in the growing season, I just call the farmer like, hey, do you have time? Oh, they don't have time. But what if I bring your lunch and we sit on your GPS tractor and we just have a conversation with each other? They absolutely love that. And then I have my interview. They had a fun day as well. And yeah, that is super nice for them. But there's also many other things. When you work with groups of farmers in the same region, well, if you collect all your data, why not organize a little barbecue with them to make it more socially attractive? Because much of our research, if you really do on-farm monitoring, what John was saying, or Yuso was saying, compare different management practices with each other, then it has a direct benefit. But much of our research is not like this. It is more higher scale research around policy, but still we need to have input from the farmers there. And then I think it's nice to find different ways to make research fun for farmers, to keep them engaged. And sometimes it's very difficult because I have the luxury that I'm staying in research for quite a while. I hope it can be my career, so I can build long-term relationships. But with students or even PhDs, they have only 6 months to do their research. So it's very fast. So then it's much more difficult to build such a relationship. So then we need to come up with solutions to still make it valuable or at least fun for the farmers. And yeah, in the paper we're going to write, there will be many more of these solutions, and I can elaborate when needed.
This is great. And I've seen some thumbs up from people in the audience and our other speakers here, so I can tell that landed. I'm curious from now the other side too, because especially in our community, we get a lot of interest from people who are trying new things and really want to get involved with universities or other research institutions, but don't know how to open those doors. Maybe they don't have previous experience or personal connections in these institutions. For those of you who have this challenge or this experience, can you give us some insights on what they could do to approach, let's say, a researcher or a university itself and be taken seriously? Loki, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe the wrong person to ask, because for me it's always very easy. Somehow people know how to find me, and I'm always very transparent in what I can help with and what I cannot. But the very least thing I can do is to tell who can provide the information. But in Wageningen, we just are all on a website. So if you Google somebody's research topic, you will, soon will and get a name out of the Wageningen system. But I think what helps a lot for researchers, but some do not like these kind of things, is to engage on social platforms. I'm not really on social media, but for some it really works. That helps for farmers to find the researchers, but also to engage more with social movements. What if the European Alliance of Regenerative Agriculture also have a communication point of an overview of research that you can always approach? That could really help. And these platforms are there. These are in place. For me, myself, I work also with 3 advisory boards or movements that work in the area of regenerative agriculture. And it's not only with farmers, but also just consumers with questions. And I really enjoy these kind of conversations because what it does, if you collect the questions of farmers or from society in general and hear it really from face to face, you also know what is yet unclear, or at least what we lack in communication from a science perspective. Because in science, already a lot is done, but apparently it did not land it yet within society. And I think we can improve that.
Nice. Yuso, can you give us some insights from your experience? Now, obviously, you are a research scientist and you had connections, but if you had to start over and you didn't have those open doors, what would you advise maybe your neighbors or other farmers to do to get a foot in the door?
Well, just grab a phone or
Yes.
keyboard. So I think the research institutes are quite aware throughout the Europe. So if you find one connection and that's not right, I think they will lead you to the right one. So there's a lot of open applications all the time going on. But what to consider on a farm scale is actually sometimes to find a proper and a suitable and relevant research project. Especially for us, it's difficult because our crop rotation demands a lot, and not every year there's a suitable field for a trial. So I would more say that the research scientists and the institute should make these calls much more earlier than they do nowadays. Maybe they're asking farmers when they're writing the application, but farmer many times needs a year or more even to prepare for a good on-farm experiment, to choose a right plot and right term of rotation. So that is to consider, should be much more earlier in this context.
Yeah, I would imagine the wait times too for getting something started can be quite long. And so you might have an idea, but before making that connection, just be realistic about these timescales that might not get a trial started for maybe even years, right?
Correct.
Loki,
Yeah,
you wanted
but-
to add something there?
Yeah, because I think this is important because especially with these field trials, the problem at the moment is that in academia, the majority of projects are short term. So also Horizon projects, if you're lucky, they're 4 years, maybe even 7 years. But if you really want to have this long-term relationship with farmers and do this kind of trials, yeah, it would be very great if you have just 10 to 20-year projects with funding, so you can build these relationships, or at least that a researcher has a good relationship with a farmer and keeps that and say, okay, maybe this project is 4 years, but we will try to get funding in from another financial source for the other years. But what happens then when you do not get the funding? That is the struggles that we face in academia, that you're half of the time you are looking for funding and the competition is very high. So yeah, that is not always easy.
There are a lot of little roadblocks in this. I think, goes back to everything we were saying at the beginning, like make these relationships, because trying to navigate all these difficulties by yourself is going to be really hard and probably way outside of the amount of time and effort that an individual wants to put into it. Now, I want to cover one more thing that's really important to this, is that research institutions are not always essential to doing very meaningful research on farms. And Jan, I always think of you when I think of someone who sets up really cool farm trials, whether you are supported or not by a university or a research organization. Can you talk about how approachable this can be for someone who is trying to learn and is not willing to wait or has not been able to find the connections or the support from an institution, how they can conduct meaningful research on their own farm?
Thanks. Maybe can I say a few words to the last questions?
Yeah, please. I know I move around real fast.
Sorry?
I know I move around a bit fast.
Yeah, no worries. So I think also to access to researchers or to technicians or who can support you, because there is the academia like Wageningen University, but there is also the agricultural chambers or technical institute most of the time in your countries that you can also approach and who can also support you in your research. And there you can approach your advisors, if it's from the agricultural chamber, for instance, or a private advisor like myself, and they can either do it themselves or they can support you as a farmer. I give you a concrete example. 4 farmers working on regenerative agriculture who in the west of Germany, middle west of Germany, approached the agricultural chambers. And then they just built a project together, got the funding, and now they are running the research on the four farms. So that can really work. Also participate in farm association in your field of work. If you are market gardeners, and there probably is a market gardening association in your country. Or if you are doing conservation agriculture, there is also very likely a conservation agriculture association from farmers and led by the farmers. And they are also often doing research or participating into research and can support you there. Also, the maybe last example is technical institutes are sometimes also farmer-led. So in France, for instance, you have Arvalis and Terinovia. They are both farmer-led. That means that the farmers are taking the decision what kind of research they are doing. And they are also quite well financed because they are paid through a small tax on the cereal and other food sales, basically. And then you can approach your colleagues and work with that. Then coming back to your question, okay, if you don't have that, so what are you doing? How can you work on that? Yeah, first, it's of course always better if you have neighbors and other people are interested in the same question. So first, speak to your neighbors to see if you can work on it together. Because also, personally, I find it more fun to work on this type of stuff with other people. Then the very easy way to go is to split your field in two and do one system one practice on one part of the field and the other practice on the other part. Of course, you need to design before. That's where, if you don't have really the knowledge, you need a bit of support to think, okay, what do I want to get as information from that trial? And to come back from, okay, what I want to get into the experiment design. Because if you want to know about the yield, then okay, you need to plan your harvest at the end along the split field, and then you will get in order to get two separate traders going to the cooperative, for instance, and getting weight, and that's it. But if you want to get other information, then you also need to plan that, get the tools and everything. So splitting the field into is a easy way, but also not a super reliable way, because you need to be aware that there is very often your soil is very different depending on where you are on your field, right? And if you I have several fields where actually there is a gradient of soil type. If you will go from the left-hand side of the field to the right-hand side. So if I split my field in two, I will get results which are not actually so representative because of that. So you need to be aware of that. Easy way to go is to go on Copernicus, look at NDVI maps to see your field heterogeneity, especially at critical times like cereal maturation, for instance. And then you see how your soil is heterogeneous, and then you can also plan a bit with that. Coming to and I think I will end up there, to the second nice way of experimenting you may have, which is still quite for a farmer, testing two different things, then to do four stripes of the first modality and 4 stripes of the second modality, and to alternate them, and then you do your measurements. You replicate 4 or 5 points of measurements in each stripe. That you can do at best also if you are in arbor, doing that along the spraying tracks. It gives you stripes so that you can also get homogeneous stripes, right? Because otherwise it gets a bit messy. Yeah, hope I answered.
That's really good advice. And we do have resources on how you can set up your own farm trials through the Climate Farmers community too, if anyone's interested in those. Plus, there are many other places where you can go to get some guidebooks or some manuals about how to set these up. But that was a really good description. Now, we're getting to the end of this guided portion, and I would love to open it up to listener questions and also for the panelists to ask questions to each other too, if you'd like. The chat has been popping off, so I will prioritize first people who raise their hands digitally because that's the best way for me to be able to see you. And then beyond that, I will go into the chat and pick questions from there. All right, Gadi, go ahead, buddy.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Really interesting. My question is about research, which is not agronomic. Actually, I have two questions. So one is agronomical. Are there new ways to do agronomic research, which is not the usual? Let's separate all the other parameters. Let's check sets, for example, not just one parameter at a time. Are you? I see Luke is smiling. So maybe there's some innovation there that we can spread in the world and learn from different parts of the world. And the other, I see Anna from Helsinki. Anna, whose last name is impossible to pronounce. Sorry. And she's doing more social, economical, anthropological research, and you didn't touch on that. And how much is that important? I'm sure Anna has a lot to say on that. So, but I think there's a lot to do there on what you have touched a bit. How busy the farmers are, what's their needs, how can you really create relationships with the farmers? These are not agronomical questions, but they can change a lot in how research with farmers can be, can create some development.
Amazing. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a very relevant aspect that we need to address. Who wants to answer that first?
I can say a few words. So especially on the first question. So traditional agronomy research with test practices, we spoke about it, but we know also that regenerative agriculture is much more about than just using one practices instead of the other one. So we are speaking about systems of practices which are implementing and matching to the context and everything. And there I'm very excited about having more measurements on pioneer farms and to measure how well they are performing comparing to the neighbors, and also how much they are performing economically. So this is something we try to do with ERA. So we did the first study from ERA, and we are going to go do also a second study, which are following the same lines. This is something for me which is really lacking to know. Okay, we had a pioneer farming in arbor farming everywhere in Germany. Sorry, somewhere in Germany. How is performing the conventional farms just neighboring on ecological indicators, social indicators, and economical indicators? I think this is a very promising part of research, and we need much more of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely agreed.
I can also maybe comment on that and also a bit contribute to Jan's question, because a lot is happening actually there. Too less on regenerative agriculture. But first on the first question of Gadi, and I think we see a transitioning happening here in research. So yes, the classical experiments on that you compare one field to the other and only change one practice and try to keep all conditions constant. I think that could be still very important for several reasons. But I also see that there's many projects, and I work on one of these projects called ReGNL, where we focus on farming systems. Because the importance there is, and that is very important to realize for many, is that different practices have different synergies and trade-offs with each other. So I saw many studies published on no tillage, and no tillage is great, and it didn't reduce yields. And that's a great message. But what they did not tell in these studies is they still use a large amount of herbicides to compensate. Doesn't mean that you cannot use no tillage without yield reductions, but it means that different practices have different synergies and trade-off with each other. Because in regenerative agriculture, it's not only reduced or no tillage, it's also the reduction or complete eliminations of herbicides and pesticides in general, but also the reduction or complete elimination of artificial fertilizers and many other things. So if you only focus on one practice, now you don't show really the impacts on different ecosystem services of the whole farming system. And the whole point with regenerative agriculture is that you do not apply one practice continuously. No, it's adaptive management. So maybe if you talk about strip grazing, one day you have the cows in one strip for an hour, but the other day maybe for 3 hours, or maybe 3 days. I don't know. And that has all different impacts. And that makes it very difficult to do classical research on regenerative farms. So, for example, in this project we run now in the Netherlands called RegNL, we try to do farming systems analysis of 100 pioneering farms. So farms that already show or mention that when they are already regenerative, they are applying these combination practices. And then we do not only monitor one indicator, what often happens, but really a multitude of different soil indicators, biodiversity indicators. So everything what you dream of, we more or less measure in this project. And that is really amazing.
Sure, it's often the relationships between many of those factors that tell you more than an analysis of a single reduced factor itself.
Exactly, because you need to look at the synergies and trade-offs. Like some indicators will improve on biodiversity, but maybe some yield indicators will reduce. And then in the end, you can make up the balance. Does it matter if you have a little bit of reduced yield in a transition period? Well, maybe no, if business models change to compensate for that. What Jan was saying about we need more data to also compare with, I think there's good efforts to solve this. So in the Netherlands, we kind of ask, it's demanded that farmers every year do soil monitoring on their fields. They need to do that. And I think even there's going to be hopefully a European law that every country will do that. And then you have this big database called the FIDN database, actually where you can show, at least for conventional and some organic farms, this kind of data where you can compare it. With regenerative, it's not in there yet, but for conventional farming, it is there.
Jan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I see also very much the complementarity between classical way of doing research and this new way of doing system research, because we also need, I think, still the classical way of doing research to understand the process, the mechanism.
Exactly.
Because, it helps to understand how nitrogen is transferred between legumes and the main crop in mixed cropping in order to design mixed cropping system and to design further. So there is still very much value in combining those new way of system research, on-farm research, and also the classical approach. I also wanted to do a bit of advertisement for a program which is running for 10 years now in France, which is a funding from the state, from France, to group of farmers who are interested into a research question. And they basically pay an agronomist, often it's half time of an agronomist, to work with this group of 10 to 15 farmers on that research question for 3 years. And this agronomist has to capitalize on all the data information collecting from that group and to bring that back up to a central system. And I often hear in Germany that France is much further away in regenerative arable cropping especially. And I'm quite convinced that's because of that program. So I would really say this kind of approach, we need more of that.
Fantastic. Anna, did you want to ask your question? Go ahead.
Thanks, and hi everyone. Thank you for putting this webinar together. Hi, Yuso. Nice to see you. So I'm, as somebody mentioned previously, Gadi, I believe I'm a social science researcher working on RegionAg for some time now, and especially from the question that I keep coming to is what kind of a university do we actually need to support initiatives such as regenerative agriculture? So we have talked about farmer-led research, and Lucky, I would love to hear more. You mentioned a little bit about participatory action research as a well-known approach, etc. But in reality, I know that this is very rarely applied. And you do work at a powerhouse of agricultural research in Europe. So it would be very interesting to hear a little bit more from you, considering also how much work you're doing on RegionAg, how much it is possible for you within your institutional structures to push for farmer-led participatory research, and what are the systemic challenges you may be facing there. And then for the whole panel, I would really love to hear your hopes and promising pathways that you see for farmer-led research on regen ag becoming a real counter to what continues to be the dominant approach to research, which is not regenerative and doesn't have a regenerative dynamic in it either? I appreciate these are very difficult questions.
Yeah, that's really
Thank
opening up a can of
you.
worms there. Thank you, Anna. Loki, you want to start us off?
Yeah, and part of it is a bit sensitive, of course, because Wageningen is a powerhouse. And often when people talk about Wageningen, some are a huge fan of it. I think that is the hippie university of Europe, but many also think quite the opposite. But you address a good problem. Wageningen is one institution, but there's many different researchers who do things in many different ways. But I can give my perspective of how I try to work with farmers. And I can even share a publication that's coming up, and that is for me really a success story in there, is that previously I worked with Horizon programs to do applications there. It is very labor intensive, and to build this relationship with farmers costs a lot of time, and often we do not have that time. I spend my time on so many different things besides research where I get actually paid for, and we also do not get compensated for that. So it's very hard to build this relationship with the farmers, because basically I do that in my free time. But because I decided like, hey, I think this is my future career and I really enjoy this, to do this with farmers together, I can spend basically my free time on building that relationship. But I'm in that luxury position that I can do that, but not everybody has the time and resources to do that. So one of the things that really supported me is that I received philanthropic funding where I'm not fixed to specific deliverables. And I asked them, hey, for the research I'm doing, that I really want to answer the questions of farmers to my capacity and to my interest, I need to talk to them. I need to get time for that. And that means that I will not have 5 publications a year, which some departments kind of demand. I will not have so many citations, but for a long-term relationship, I will have farmers around me that I can ask questions and they can ask me questions. So one study, and it linked a little bit to the discussions we had before, was that I feel that often farmers at this moment, especially regenerative farmers, know much more about the impact of regenerative practices compared to researchers. I think on many practices, there's a lot of ambiguity, and scientists say, that doesn't work because nothing is published on it yet. But because nothing is published on a specific practice does not mean it doesn't work. It means maybe science is just simply behind. And we need to get the resources together to actually research something. That takes a lot of time, of course. But for that reason, I said, okay, yeah, I cannot answer these specific questions, because for this, indeed what Jan was saying, have long-term trials on specific practices to see what is the impact of, for example, regenerative grazing in a non-brittle Dutch environment. For dairy, there's no literature on that. Or composting, or I don't know what practices are quite novel in a European or even a Dutch context. But what I can do is try to collect the knowledge sources that regenerative farmers get their information from. So what we did recently is with the farmers I worked with, said, hey, this is what you want to know. Okay, then I will ask all the regenerative farmers we can find the question, what do you consider regenerative practices and where do you get your knowledge from? And then we create an overview. We will publish a scientific article on that, on more the knowledge dynamics, how these knowledge flows are working. Besides that, we can give a database to all the farmers where you can look for specific practices, but also find what the knowledge sources are behind these practices and which were valuable for regenerative farmers themselves. And I don't know, farmers are very happy with that. So that gave me a lot of joy. And maybe it will not be the biggest impact article, etc. And I do not have 5 articles per year, but at least this was very helpful for the farmers. And that made me a lot of very happy. And for Anna, what really helped me right now in Wageningen, in this powerhouse, is that Wageningen is changing their academic evaluation system. So Anna's also in in science is that if you enter a tenure track, there are specific demands that you need to have so many publications a year. You need to supervise so many PhDs. They're changing that in that you're way more flexible to decide how you are evaluated. So also, for example, social impact or farmer relationships can count for your appreciation. And I think that at the moment is very helpful. It's still work in progress. They just started that system. I'm very curious how that will change.
It's all very encouraging. So you want to jump in there?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Anna, for your question about the requirements of the farmer-led research. I just gonna add to what Luki said, but I think farmers also need some kind of caretaking in farmer-led research. And many times those projects need, of course, coordination, management, some dissemination, communication. And that is not researchers' task either. We need to understand. So this needs some dedicated resources in those projects. And especially these caretakers, if I may call them, they need to speak farmers' language and understand their life. And in the best case, they're actually farmers themselves, or they have farming background. Because I think the key to the success in farmer-led research is actually the motivation of the farmers and the trust, like it was mentioned in the chat as well. So to build that, especially in perennial several year projects, that is very important. For example, in one of our cases, farmer just forgot the plot that was part of the experiment and tilled that accidentally. So they need to keep on track, maybe monthly during the season, and how you're doing, how's it going. And many times farmers really appreciate that they are contacted, but there needs to be understanding of how you contact them, what are you discussing, how's the weather, for example, having effect on what they're doing. So dedicated resources and farmers should be in the core of this thing all the time.
Jan, did you want to add to that too?
On the you mean on the sorry, can you specify exactly the question?
No worries. If you wanted to give any of your perspective on these insights that the two of them just gave, or if Anna, you wanted
yeah, got it.
Go ahead.
I think so I don't have so much more to say from what Loki and Tuzo were saying on that
Okay.
end.
Gadi, do you want to ask another question, bud?
Hi, thank you. One little comment and then a question to Jan, actually. One little comment that comes into my mind. I don't know, 30 years or so, Harvard University changed their approach to how they teach people to become medical doctors. Once they found with research that when the doctor pays well attention to the patient, things happen much better than if the doctor is looking at the screen all the time, which happened more and more. And that came out from Harvard, and then the rest followed. And by the way, whatever Wageningen will do, the rest will follow, and UC Davis, and I hope they'll do more. So that's just an observation. So looking at the data too much doesn't help the farmers who are, you can see them as patients, looking for the doctors to tell them what should they do to improve their situation. That's just, I think, interesting analogy. I wanted to ask Jan, as a French, right? You work in France.
I'm French, but I work in Germany.
I want to ask you about France from your experience. I don't know if other people here know. I've been hearing that the French people speak mostly French, and they don't come to English-speaking events. But actually, the whole system in France, education and research and all that, in the direction of Regenerative, which is more called soins vivants, living soils in France, since 15 or so. It's very
Agroecology.
advanced. Yeah. Oh, so it's very advanced. Do you see that? Is there something bubbling up for long in France or no? How do you see that?
Yes, I already said about this program, which is running for actually more than 10 years now, with us small group of farmers doing research with the support of an agronomist. Do you remember that? This I mentioned that just a bit earlier, and that was one of the initiative which was made by our former agricultural minister, Stéphane Le Foll, under Hollande. So it was before Macron. So he started about 14 years ago and finished his work 9 years ago. And he came from a rural area. He had a very deep understanding on how farmers and farming is working. He had already contact within farming, worked already for agroecology, conservation agriculture to promote that within the EU. And then he got this into this position 5 years as agricultural minister of France. 5 years, quite long. And he pushed what I already explained, but also he pushed a movement from the education of farming, from the farmer, but also from the agronomist in the direction of what we call agroecology in French. Sol vivant is more maraîchage sur sol vivant, which is also a very strong network in France. So those two initiatives really supported the development of agroecology in France, both from farmers, researchers, but also from advisors, because advisors got this funding and got them to work very closely with innovative group of farmers and get trained through that. And I say hello to my colleagues from Biosphere, for instance, which is one of the leading consultancy company for regenerative agriculture in the world. We started with gaining a lot of experience with French farmers through those subsidized research groups. So yes, I see a lot bubbling, as you said, in France, and I'm quite convinced it has a lot to do with this initiative from this agricultural minister, and also from dynamic group of farmers. So, for instance, Sol Vivant, Maraîchage sur Sol Vivant, was also a very bottom-up initiative from farmers. There's a combination of maybe innovative spirit from farmers in France, or group of farmers, and those initiatives.
Thank you.
I was also blown away as an American to understand that in France they mostly speak French. But it's very good to know that they're also innovative and pushing things forward. It's a shame that there's that language barrier.
But to be honest, it's also less and less the case. So you have more and more people bringing this knowledge and exchanging. So I say Biosphere. You can also Google ecosystem. I told you today, Oliver, or another one, a friend of mine, Novelis Terra. So you have more and more people you can contact. Also speak English.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there are great resources out there. To wrap this up, though, I think we've got time either for one more question or if you guys have questions for each other.
I have a question, but I don't know how to raise my hand. So.
No worries, Martin, jump in.
Yeah, I'm wondering because I feel like there's a lot of good insights that are super helpful for collaborating with farmers. But there's one specific type of farmer that I would say that still will be hard to reach, even if we follow all of these things that we've discussed. And that's really the farmers who are very resistant towards all of these, let's say, regenerative practice principles, ideas. How can we collaborate with them? Is basically my question to the whole panel.
It's an interesting one. Is that a goal that any of you guys have, Jan?
Yes, I would. I don't necessarily collaborate with them directly for the research, but work with them in the spirit of helping them to go in that direction of regenerative agriculture, so as a consultant, and that helps to find ways to meet their interest. And they're working with industry partners is helping. And when there are those farmers, they are producing a product which goes to an industry, which can be a milk industry or potato industry or whatever. And this industry is convinced that regenerative agriculture is the way to go. Then you can, through this partnership, also access to farmers who would not go regenerative. Or you really find also the pain points of those farmers. Often in my area, for instance, pressure on the amount of water they can use for irrigation. They see it won't last so long that they need to reduce that. Or also pesticide regulation, for instance. They see that pesticide is going down, they don't have alternative solution. And then you can enter through that door, proposing solutions for that specific problem, and then sensibilize them to the systemic approach of RegAg.
Yeah, I can also very nice to see you here, Maarten. Maarten is actually one of the young researchers that will work a lot with farmers in his PhD project in
Let's
Regional.
hope so.
But from my experience, actually, it is not so hard to reach to them and to talk to them. Actually, they, of course, the discussions and the talks you will have with them are way more critical, but they are very able to put their thumb on the points where it hurts the most. And sometimes these talks are very valuable. And I have one experience from my own PhD project where I try to look for very conventional farmers that really use still a lot of pesticides, a lot of artificializers to talk with them and see what were the opportunities for them to transition to regenerative agriculture. And what I found out is that actually they're quite open for conversations. I had one farmer in Zeeland, it's a part of the Netherlands, and actually something very bad happened there due to the regenerative farmers who worked there. He said, I don't really believe in it. I'm too old to change. I like the way I do things. And he had a pesticide lab, and he was very proud of the pesticide lab that he had on his farm. But at the same time, on the social side of things, he hosted children that didn't have a family anymore, that came from immigrants. And it was very nice. Nobody knew that. I knew that. But he was in a group app with regenerative farmers. And he asked the question like, hey, how can I use a part of my field and implement regenerative practices? Not completely move towards regenerative, but use a couple of practices to play around with. And these regenerative farmers, they were really cruel to him and said, you need to completely eliminate it. You are stupid if you use pesticides. In the end, the farmer felt, so not well treated that he just left the group app, but also left the complete project. And that was very much a pity, because if they knew that he was critical, but very open for the conversation, things could change for him as well. So I would not say that farmers that are resistant are hard to reach. They're actually very much open for the conversation, but also with them, you need to find a way to talk and build a relationship.
Very powerful insight there, and I really appreciate the story. With the last minute here, Maarten, do you want to join in here?
Yeah, thank you. Very, very interesting. What I feel also as a coach regenerative milk production in some projects. One of the is with climate farmers. One we start with Jan now, and another one for Arla. There, I always feel the fear of the farmers that they lose their income, and they're always afraid if they do regenerative actions or practices that they lose yield. And it's always good to hear very well, to listen very well to their fears, and slowly bring them by their original business model. So making yields with sunlight, yeah, that's the one. So they don't pay off their loans and their debts with kilogram milk per cow per year. They pay with margin. They pay with money. So that's one of the things. And the second thing, what we are generally missing in the education of farmers, but also of the students in on the university, is actually that we don't, like user said, manage money, nature, and people at once. So we are missing the holistic management that should be in all educations. Yeah. Alan Savory's daughter, she wrote a very good book about it. Children immediately understand it. We adult people with our experiences, we don't understand it. Yeah, that's the book Never Lose Sight of Your Elephant. It's a very good book. Children understand it. We don't. And that's the most important thing what we have to learn, even as adults, also to be more successful, like the other Maarten here, as this, what Lucky was telling about, is the students which have problems now, how to reach the farmers, etc. And then, of course, it has also be, the research also has to be more from a holistic view. I don't know how to say it very well in English. My mother language is Dutch, but yeah, I hope it is clear. Yeah. So that was my advice and also my experiences. But this what I'm doing, bringing, always inspiring the farmers to do small trials, like Jan said, for half fields or several things. That is very important, that they see on their own field how regenerative practices can work. Yeah. First, they have to see in a different way and understand in a different way. And that's also what keeps myself very young between my ears. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. That is a wonderful note for us to wrap things up on. I can tell that this discussion can go on for a lot longer. There's some real passionate people here keeping this energy going. So I just want to remind everyone that the continuation of this conversation is happening on the Climate Farmers community. This is where we coordinate these exchanges, and we use these conversations as the feed material that turn into panels later, and we keep the conversation going that way. Thank you so much to the panelists today, Loki, Juuso, and Jan. It's a pleasure to catch up with you guys, and we'll see you all hopefully again on the next one coming up in August. Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you for having us.